They just made a new Marvel game over in Montreal, Canada, and guess what? It's actually good. And here's the crazy part, you don't need to apologise for enjoying it. We've been trained, conditioned even, to expect North American releases to feel like corporate experiments instead of actual games. You boot them up and within minutes, you can almost hear the boardroom breathing down your neck. The mandatory battle pass, the half-finished life service roadmap. The grim sense that you are not playing something built to entertain you, but participating in a behavioural funnel designed to monetize your boredom. Cosmic Invasion is the complete opposite of that. It's brazen, punchy, and actually remembers the radical idea that players might want to have fun without being financially waterboarded by the publisher. It's a Marvel title that doesn't treat you like a hostage, but instead treats you like a gamer. Like, honestly, what a novelty with a modern high-profile release. So let's celebrate it. I am Lady Decade, and if you like your games to actually be good, then hit that subscribe button, because this is the amazing Marvel Cosmic Invasion. There is a particular kind of mood that settles over you when you realise that you are playing in a year of gaming that feels strangely hollow. Over the last few years, we've been treated to studio tentpoles that apologise for their own existence, that tether entire mechanics to battle passes, that restrict basic features until you've proved your worth to an algorithm, and that deliver their fun with the same clinical detachment you might expect from a mortgage lender. In boardrooms, it has become acceptable and encouraged to pretend that game design is merely content management, that players aren't human beings with taste, but engagement funnels waiting to be converted into predictable revenue curves. So, at a surface glance, you would imagine that Marvel Cosmic Invasion would be just another cog in that machine, another cash grab accessory to the Marvel industrial complex. Fortunately though, this isn't true at all. In fact, it reaches back into gaming's past, grabs a fistful of arcade chaos by the throat and slams it straight onto our screens. Speaking of Marvel-related arcade chaos, many of us grew up with the amazing sprites-based Marvel vs. Capcom series. Not only have we gained this new Marvel beat-em-up, but last year they finally brought the 7-game spanning Marvel vs. Capcom arcade collection home. But what's crazier is that using my links you can get a massive 61% off the usual price, as well as 78% off the massive Cowabunga collection, 83% off the Capcom Fighting collection, 82% off the Capcom Beat 'em Up bundle, and up to 90% off of thousands of modern titles too. There are so many irresistible deals for next to nothing, so I advise you to treat yourself soon. Anyway, happy shopping, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video.
Vibranium Blade!
From its very first reveal earlier in the year, Cosmic Invasion spoke a language that AAA studios have forgotten. It did not posture as a prestige production or genuflect before the Marvel Studios logo. It introduced itself like a counter-proposal, the type of thing that someone whispers in a meeting that should get them fired. What if we just made a game people actually want to play? That's heresy. Informed everything, the pulse of its trailer, the tone of its soundtrack, the way that the characters moved with mechanical confidence, and the unapologetic suggestion that you are not being sold an experience but invited to enjoy one. The violence wasn't theatrical, it was joyful, the kind you remember from crowded cabinets, elbowing strangers aside during boss fights that felt like communal warfare rather than milestone checkpoints. More importantly, it evoked something that has been treated as a relic, the idea that playability is the product, not brand fidelity. For many of you watching, there is an older memory that lingers from within. For those who cut their teeth in the 90s arcades, Cosmic Invasion understands it instinctively. You could step into a dimly lit games hall, see a Marvel logo glowing above a monitor, and feel gravity tug you towards it. You didn't need a cinematic universe to convince you that it mattered either. It was enough that Cyclops could launch a Sentinel into the wall so hard the cabinet rattled. That is why the idea of a modern Marvel game returning to those roots felt almost laughable. Fans of the original X-Men arcade title have lived like hermits for decades, gnawing on emulation crumbs and re-release scraps, convinced that the golden age had ended when the last CRT screen was switched off. Cosmic Invasion's arrival has just shattered that assumption, not because it's reinvented the genre, but because it refused to reinvent it. It embraces the central pleasure of the brawler. Be loud, be fast, and never apologise for either. When Tribute Games first unveiled it, there was a different kind of electricity in the air, not the synthetic hype of YouTubers gasping at trailers, but the quiet conspiratorial rumble of players who recognised sincerity. There wasn't a pretense of elevating the genre, no interminable cinematic montage explaining why the game deserved respect. Cosmic Invasion appeared with the serene confidence of something that understood its own identity. And in an era bloated with promises, that approach felt really quite refreshing. It looked like the polar opposite of most modern games. A game that actually looked fun, and most modern publishers strangle fun. Its emergence is redemption for every player who remembers that X-Men cabinet trembling under the weight of furious button mashing. And if you want the exact moment that the industry blinked, it was the roster reveals. Captain America and Spider-Man, Storm, Venom, Wolverine, Nova, Phyla-Vell, each character arrived as if they'd stepped off a splash page rather than a PowerPoint. Then came She-Hulk and Rocket Raccoon, followed by the shimmering audacity of Silver Surfer and Beta Ray Bill, backed by a voice cast ripped straight from the Saturday morning era. And finally, as if to remind everyone that subtlety has its limits, Iron Man and Phoenix closed the announcements, not only with content-bait hysteria, but with the quiet satisfaction of people who had realised something rare. Someone had made a Marvel game for players and not for shareholders. Watching the documentary-style footage about the making of the game, what mattered was how the character choices exposed Tribute's priorities. A lesser studio would have insulated itself with the safest combination imaginable, an Avengers-heavy roster, perhaps a Guardian or two to keep the film crowd happy. Tribute did something far less cynical. They approached their roster like archivists. They asked not who will sell, but who will make the roster feel like Marvel. Icons sit beside comic oddities. Spider-Man stands shoulder to shoulder with Phyla-Vell. Captain America shares a space with anti-heroes, alien knights, and radiant misfits. They speak less to tourists and more to the people who knew Marvel before it became a cinematic brand, the readers who turned ink and pulp into myth. That curatorial spirit bleeds into the experience long before you've touched the controller. Cosmic Invasion does not open by apologising for being a brawler. The first wave of enemies hits like someone has just slammed a coin into an arcade machine. Before you've even adjusted your grip, there's no ritual of permission or 20-hour onboarding period where the game begs you to care. You care because the very first punch explains itself. This is a brawler, a real one, not a prestige product wearing a game's clothing like most of the slop that gets churned out at the moment. And the centre of its identity is the Cosmic Swap system, a tag mechanic that defines the rhythm of combat. Most modern games treat tag features as a garnish, a cooldown trick, a novelty animation, a half-hearted nod to depth. But here, the swap is structural. The battlefield becomes a score, and you are the composer. Phoenix's aerial dominance might tear the screen open in crackling arcs, and then Ghost Rider explodes forward, converting chaos into carnage. Tagging changes the cadence of the fight because it changes the person doing the fighting. That's why Cosmic Invasion is so satisfying. You feel the difference the moment the character lands. Posture, reach, tempo, even how the screen seems to breathe around them. There's a physical pleasure to it. The same primal thrill arcade fighters used to tap into before analytics departments strangled them. Every clean swap is a tiny moment of authorship, a reminder that you are not trudging through someone else's monetization plan, but you're actually playing a video game. And speaking of when video games were great, If Marvel Cosmic Invasion seemed to be up your alley, then it's likely that you love gaming styles of old as a whole. In that case, it's probably wise that I inform you now that I have a separate channel called Lady Arcade, where each week we celebrate another classic game console. We have looked at the Saturn, the Dreamcast, Jaguar, 3DO, Amiga CD32 and so many more already. So if you want even more of a change of pace from what most of the modern gaming world is churning out, then make sure you subscribe to Lady Arcade. Everything about Marvel Cosmic Invasion reeks of its unmistakable lineage. Marvel vs. Capcom is the gospel of tag play. Tribute lifts the frenetic pulse of versus games and threads it through the grammar of a side-scrolling beat-em-up, and that fusion is why it works. Beat-em-ups are not arenas of solitary optimization, they are engines of managed chaos. The tag button becomes reflex-like blinking or bracing before an impact, a physical answer to the battlefield. It is the best designed decision the game makes because it redefines how the player moves through space, no longer as a unit but as a duet, and that is why Cosmic Invasion feels radically different from every Marvel title that spent the last 10 years trying to elevate the genre through cinematics. It doesn't pretend it needs story trailers or prestige framing to be taken seriously. In Cosmic Invasion, it happens in hitboxes and collisions. Every combo, every burst of lightning, every desperate tag-in is a sentence, and the game trusts the player to read it. But mechanics are only half the revelation. The real spark, the thing that lingered in my head long after I put the controller down, came from the characters who are so often homogenized in AAA spaces, the women. Modern blockbuster design has a habit of treating femininity like a slider on a template. Identical silhouettes, identical postures, identical strength profiles, the occasional haircut option, a personality crafted to avoid offending shareholders. Cosmic Invasion refuses that flattening. It understands something deeply unfashionable in AAA circles. A female character is not a palette swap of a male one, she is a mechanical identity of her very own. With the likes of Storm, for example, this becomes undeniable. Tribute animated her as a monarch of elements. She doesn't simply walk, she glides as if gravity acknowledges her rank. Her body language communicates dominion over the atmosphere, not participation in it. Phoenix is not balanced, she is volatile by design. She-Hulk is not a green recolor of Hulk's animations. Her strikes carry the explosive athleticism of a trained fighter, as if she's launching herself into every blow like a spring-loaded piston. And Phyla-Vell carries herself as something alien, refusing to mimic the human rhythms of her teammates. You don't need to see the models to know who they are. You could black out the screen and identify every one of them purely by how they move. This attention to embodied identity is increasingly rare in AAA development. Fidelity is prioritised over personality, and Cosmic Invasion breaks that spell, and in doing so reminds players of something the industry keeps trying to forget. We don't actually respond to content bullet points. We respond well to good-looking, well-designed characters. And this is a generous game because it gives you more than mechanical novelty. Its presentation is an argument in its own right. The opening cinematic is not a Marvel Studios pastiche. It's a love letter to the era of 90s television intros, a blast of energy that would sit comfortably on Fox Kids back in the day. The stages are dense, noisy and confident, and every space feels like a place rather than a corridor. The soundtrack commits to arcade bravado rather than modern cinematic wallpaper. You don't just hear them, you play them. The music anchors every punch and tag-in with the confidence of a universe that is not remotely ashamed of being colourful, loud and aggressive. The whole experience is a sensory feast.
Feel the power of my flames!
I played Cosmic Invasion with my husband, and that's where another layer of its design revealed itself. One of the fascinating things about sharing a game with someone else, especially someone who lives with systems, is how quickly your identities surface for your choices. So he gravitated more towards Storm and Wolverine because he liked the nice balance of aerial combat and brute force on the ground, whereas I was a bit more experimental. I stuck with Phoenix and Ghost Rider. Cosmic Invasion is a mid-budget title, not a prestige giant, and it doesn't pretend otherwise. It's a self-contained, unapologetic project that treats a few hours of joyful chaos as something worth delivering without guilt. It doesn't claw at your calendar or ambush your evenings with season passes or daily engagement quotas. And you're not really expected to treat it like a second job. It's a perfect break from the norm, the kind you spend laughing, swearing and losing track of the clock. And like the best of all of the beat-em-ups, it's a mechanical playground to be replayed, have its systems pushed, experimented with and see how far you can get before the genre bares its teeth. A brawler that can be completed quickly is not too short, it is honest. It values mastery over retention and skill over loyalty metrics. It speaks to the arcade's bloodline rather than the industry's spreadsheet logic. The irony is that this honesty feels radical because we've been conditioned to think that bloat is synonymous with value. Cosmic Invasion reminds us that concise is not a sign of weakness but a form of respect. It gives you everything it has and then invites you to come back, not because you're trapped but because you want to return. That desire is a measure of a game's worth. Like, imagine that. Imagine designing a game that people go back and play again because it is actually good. Tribute Games has already hinted at post-launch additions, and given how confidently they handled expansions for Shredder's Revenge, I do find myself genuinely curious. The Marvel cosmos is overflowing of oddities and pagan-sounding experiments. If Tribute is permitted to keep building, Cosmic Invasion could grow into something far more audacious, not because it needs to justify itself or anything, but because the genre deserves the ambition. Marvel Cosmic Invasion is not perfect, it's not immaculate, but it is one of the vanishingly few modern titles that understands what gaming used to be, a place where play mattered more than posture, where characters did not need excuses to be themselves, and where chaos isn't a flaw but a value. It is a beautifully animated and mechanically confident rejection of the AAA imagination. It shrugs at the pretensions of cinematic gaming and reminds us that the purpose of a beat-em-up is not to impress you, but it is to thrill you. So if you have any affection for arcade brawlers, for Marvel mythology, or simply for the stubborn belief that games should be fun, then I urge you to give this one a go, because if this is what the mid-budget future of gaming looks like, then let those blockbusters burn. Their place will not be taken by corporate experiments masquerading as entertainment. Games like this will take it, completely unashamed of where they come from. Also, don't forget that by using my link below, you can get a massive 61% off the 7-game spanning Marvel vs. Capcom Arcade Collection, 78% off the massive Cowabunga Collection, 83% off the Capcom Fighting Collection, 82% off the Capcom Beat 'em Up Bundle, and up to 90% off of thousands more modern titles too. I'd also like to remind you that if you want more retro goodness, head over to Lady Arcade, where I have covered the history on a cornucopia of consoles. And if you really love what I do and want to support me in a more personal way, then access my behind the scenes cosplay library and more by becoming a backer over on Patreon. Look forward to potentially speaking with you over there, and I'll see you all again in the next video.